James Murphy, welcome to 69 Face of Rock. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How about you?
I'm good. Thank you for speaking with me. And the purpose of this interview is to discuss your involvement with Agent Steel, right? This is at the very beginning of your career. And first of all, congratulations on having this release finally available. Please tell me, how did this come about?
I have no idea how the release of this came about. I'm completely not involved in that at all. Um, my involvement with this particular release and any iteration of it that's ever existed um, pretty much ended that day back in 1987 when I played the final notes and walked off stage and away from the cameras and recording equipment at the Hammersmith Odeon in
Mhm.
London back in back in 1987. That was the end of my involvement with this recording. I have nothing to do with it beyond that.
Mhm. Although I
I
did
mean,
notice that some of the information in the booklet came from you. So were you, did anybody reach out to speak to you?
uh, I, I have definitely done one other interview. I think fairly recently. I mean, within the last month, uh, about my time at Agent Steel, but I don't really remember the particulars and details of who it was and what all what
Well,
all was discussed.
let's get to it. Have you had a chance to hear and see the new release?
No, not the new version of it. I saw it years and years ago, like at least a couple decades ago. It came out. Oh man, probably longer than a couple decades ago. Probably about 3 decades ago. It came out on VHS tape many,
Yeah,
many years ago.
I remember
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, I saw it back then, and since then I've seen clips on YouTube. I got to admit, it's difficult for me to watch. I have trouble watching and listening to video of myself that's recent.
Hmm.
Um, uh, just because it's I mean, unless you're an absolute narcissist, it's kind of difficult to watch yourself, you know, on video. It's kind of uncomfortable. And I'm also like probably the biggest critic of my own playing. So I notice every little detail, any little thing that's wrong, and it really bums me out. So I have a hard time to watch stuff and to listen to it after the fact. Um, but I do always try to watch and listen to things at least once or twice just to so that I can say I did. But I got to admit, I haven't watched that entire show since. In fact, I don't think I've ever watched the entire show on any medium at all.
Hmm.
I watched a bit of the VHS back when that came out, and I couldn't make it through the whole thing. And I've watched snippets of clips, various clips that are on YouTube.
I have to say they kind of cleaned it up real nicely. I remember the videotape, and that was like an import tape recorded from the PAL system onto NTSC, and it was not the best transfer, and it kind of left a lot to be desired. And I think they got it right this time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to checking it out. I look forward to getting, some copies and everything.
Hmm.
Certainly want it for the archives. It's the very first professional, quote unquote professional work that I ever did. You know,
Uh, Personally,
I was just a kid who had only ever played. I mean, prior to playing this, big headlining show at the Hammersmith Odeon, which had a multiple camera shoot and a multi-level stage with crazy lighting and all this crazy stuff. And prior to that show, I had only ever played live in front of people, I think 3 times. I played like a high school variety show type show, playing some covers with a couple of my buddies from school, and then I played a couple of cover gigs at a bar
hmm.
with an old friend of mine. We threw together a cover band, and we were playing stuff like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and early Metallica and early Megadeth and even some of the hair band stuff like Rat and the cooler Motley Crue songs from the first couple of albums. So we were playing like a mix of stuff like that, and that's that's my only live experience in front of a couple hundred people at a high school variety show, and then two times in front of maybe 30 people at a bar,
Mhm.
playing always cover songs. So this is my very first, this Hammersmith Odeon show in 1987 was my very first time ever playing
I definitely
an
have some
actual gig.
questions about this. Now, personally, on a positive note, what would you say you like best about this recording?
For me, it's at an iconic venue,
Hmm.
a very iconic venue. I grew up listening to like Motorhead's No Sleep Till Hammersmith album and stuff like that, and other various other things that had been recorded there, and I had read so many back at the time that I was listening to that stuff and reading about it. I was living in Germany, so I wasn't terribly far from London.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but I never made the trip over there at that point. Um, but I was living in Germany and I was reading this in like the early iterations of Metal Hammer and Rock Hard and things like that. And these are when you probably remember back in those days, those magazines were, I'm talking about 84, 80, 83, 84, 80, these magazines were newsprint. They were on newsprint. They were like a they were like a newspaper more than a magazine at that time.
Correct. That was the early stages of heavy metal press.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, did you enjoy the moment playing at Hammersmith Odeon? Like, did you capture that in your mind? Like, how significant was that for you?
No, it was very significant. It was very important, and I definitely remember the moments when we had good, crowd involvement, the more popular songs, the riffs that people really liked, and they would get into it, and to be, like I said, I had played a high school variety show, which we got cheers at the end, but while we were playing, they're sitting in chairs staring at us, you know, and at the bar, you're lucky if someone yells "Freebird" in between songs, you know. So uh, to 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 be playing and to look out and see metalheads getting into it, banging their heads, raising their fists, you know, that most definitely got in my brain and stayed there. It made me realize, that hey, this could be really fun, to actually do as a career. It's what I always wanted, but I had a little bit of a rough time getting to that point of walking onto that stage. And if we get to it, I'll tell you why I had a rough time even walking onto that stage. And and wondering, like, when is this going to become fun? When is this going to be good? And it was when I looked down and realized that people were responding to me playing these riffs and were enjoying it and were having a good time, were, banging their, raising their fists and, pumping their fists and banging their heads. And I was just like, okay, this is what it's about. All right. This is what I wanted. This is what I did when I was every time I was in crowds at a metal show, Um, so yeah, uh, that's what really sticks with me about the show. Just the fact that it was at this iconic venue that meant so much to me as a kid growing up. Knowing that I was going to be playing that was very exciting for me, and especially considering it was my first real show ever. And then just the crowd reaction. I wouldn't say it was an overwhelming crowd reaction, and the Hammersmith wasn't quite sold out at all.
Hmm.
It wasn't a sold out show. I mean, it was pretty well attended, but it wasn't a sold out show or anything. And there were people who were heavily skeptical of us because of just, three new members all of a sudden before the new album even came out, you
That's
know?
right.
So they had every right to be skeptical of us. And so it created a sort of a strange atmosphere. And to see that we won over at least a decent percentage of them, and they were up there responding and getting into it, that really stuck in my mind, and was kind of my big takeaway, really.
Outstanding. Seeing and hearing yourself on stage at age, what, 19,
Yeah,
what comes to
19.
mind?
Oh man, just how skinny I was. How I let myself get talked into dyeing my hair dark. My hair is not black naturally. It's also wasn't naturally white. That's just old age. um, but my hair is kind of brown. Kind of a. But seeing it, like, it is how silly it was that I let myself get talked into uh, dyeing my hair and into wearing that silly jumpsuit. It turns out we were maybe onto something. We beat Slipknot to it, by over a decade,
Definitely.
um, uh, by probably more kind of like like about 12 to 15 years or something like that. We beat Slipknot to it, but I thought it was silly. I thought it was silly at the time. I didn't want to do it, and it turns out that's the only show that I wore that. I refused after that to put it back on because I just thought it was lame.
And it's captured forever.
Captured forever. Captured. I actually entertained the idea, and this is why going onto the stage was difficult for me. I knew that from where the dressing room was, anyone that's super familiar, especially artists who are familiar with the Hammersmith, at least the way it was back then, if you're from audience perspective, looking at the stage, the dressing rooms were over to the right. So the dressing rooms were stage left, audience right. And, but I was playing on stage right. That's where I had to come up. And because of this big construct on the stage, this big 3-level riser for the entire band, it took up a good chunk of the stage. And so the plan was for me to walk underneath it through the rigging of this thing and come up on the other side so that I could come up the steps there without, being seen walking across the stage. That was the instructions I was given. And in my mind, I really, really was seriously entertaining just having jeans and a t-shirt underneath the jumpsuit and stopping about midway and taking the jumpsuit off because I had a few minutes to spare. And I tell you, the only reason I didn't do that is because my mother had tailored the jumpsuit to fit me better because I was super skinny and it was super baggy. And so I could not fit jeans underneath it, you know? So that ended up being a non-starter. I had to just sort of say the heck with it and walk on stage with the jumpsuit. I didn't really have a choice. But after that show, I rebelled and refused to wear it again. As did the other guy. The other guy that was wearing a full jumpsuit, the other guitar player.
Whose idea was it to record the show?
I have no idea. I imagine it probably was a management thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think at that time we had management. I think it's very possible that before the end of the tour we no longer had it. Just because so many ridiculous things happened on the tour. I could not speak accurately to that though. I could be wrong. I don't really remember because certainly I was just I was a new guy. I was not privy to the too much of the what went on underneath the what went on underneath the bonnet, as they say.
I know that musicians are always very critical of their performances, and you already mentioned that. Is there anything that makes you cringe when you hear this back?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a really awful moment. Well, there's a song that I wrote the majority, if not all of, in terms of the riffs. And I think maybe Richard Bateman had a riff in it. Um, rest in peace,
Mhm.
Richard Bateman, the bass player who went on to play in Nasty Savage and who several years ago passed away.
Great guy.
Yeah, yeah, super great guy and really good bass player. And I think he may have had a riff in it, but I wrote the majority of it. It was called "The Unexpected." They have since released that song on a fairly recent recording or single or album. I'm not sure they've released it. It has all new lyrics and a new title, but the riffs are all the same. So it's the riffs that I wrote back then. But at the beginning of that, it starts off something like a yeah. And I started the song off by myself, you know, with this riff.
Uh-huh.
I think the other guy did like the sound effecty type thing, and then I came in with that riff alone, and I, I said it's my first time on a real stage, and I'm approaching my little pedal board to hit the right patch because I think I was on the mute patch so that I could tune silently, and I had my guitar all tuned up. I was ready, and as the other guy started the weird noises, and it was coming up to the part where I needed to come in alone. It was going to be my big moment, kicking off the show. Spotlight on me, jamming this riff. Well, right as I went up to start to step on the pedal board, here comes a camera guy running. He's to the camera guy's credit, he was on it. He was watching us like hawks, and he saw me about to approach the pedal board, so he knew I was about to kick off this tune. So he ran from where he was and then slid on his knees to right in front of me and slid and then came around with the camera like this, right in my face. And I was just like, so, whoa, I was kind of intimidated by that. And my foot just hit the wrong button. And so instead of, it was like clank, 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 clank. It sounded awful, man. So I was playing with like this patch with nothing on it, no distortion, nothing. And it just absolutely sounded horrible, wretched. And that's captured forever for everyone to watch and have a good chuckle at.
I suppose you can justify Richie Blackmore's behavior at the California Jam, right?
Oh man, hopefully I didn't react so much like that, but I know that I was mortified. I was absolutely mortified that that happened, and for years I couldn't even watch a clip of that. I was like, as soon as I knew that was what happened, I was like, move. No, I don't want to watch that. I walk away, fast forward ahead, whatever. I've maybe only looked at stuff from that show less than one handful of times, and each time I've had a difficulty to watch that bit where I'm, yeah.
Private nightmare moment. Anyways, how developed were you as a guitar player at the time that you joined Agent Steel?
Oh, not very. I'll be honest with you. I had been playing guitar about maybe 2.5 years,
Mhm. That's
so
very impressive.
not very long at all. You know, um, but I made rapid progress in those 2.5 years. What I put it down to is that I knew that I wanted to play guitar from about age 8, 7 or 8. I knew that I wanted to play guitar, and my dad had a guitar. He just didn't let me play with it. He didn't let me use it, particularly when he wasn't around. But as I got to be about 11 or 12, he started showing me a couple of chords. He showed me the typical,
Mhm.
G, D, you know, E major, A minor, C. So he showed me some basic chords, and he taught me my first melody. Shave and haircut, and that's all he ever really taught me was just the basic. We call them the cowboy chords. Your basic open chords,
Uh-huh.
and that little silly melody. And believe it or not, that silly little melody was transformative for me because it made me realize, oh, you can play melodies. It's not just chords. You can play melodies, and I'm like, that makes sense. Because I hear melodies when I listen to music,
Hmm.
and but I used to listen to music so intently. I still do, but when other kids might have been in their room playing with their Star Wars toys or their Matchbox cars or something, I usually sat with my little plastic turntable, my little stack of records, and headphones, and I would turn the lights off, and I just sat there and I listened. And I had so much music, in particular guitar parts, internalized. I knew what they were supposed to sound like. I did not know how to execute them on a guitar. I had no idea about that. But I had memorized every little nuance and inflection. I could hum you anything, when I was probably 9 years old, anything that I listened to. I knew the guitar parts in my brain, in my mind. I had them down pat. So by the time I actually started playing and started figuring out songs, the songs that I figured out were songs that I had been listening to for years, and I just knew what they were supposed to sound like. So I learned quickly because of that, and that's why I think after only 2.5 years maybe of playing guitar, I was able to get that gig. But I have to say that when I listened to the album, when I listened to Skeptic's Apocalypse, I was like, yeah, I can play this stuff, no problem, no
Hmm.
big deal. There's nothing really fancy. And those guys were great guitar players. I'm a fan of Kurt Colfelt,
Hmm.
you know,
Oh yeah, big time.
and his later stuff, Holy Terror. I'm a fan of Juan Garcia. Evil Dead, and now he's with Body Count. And I'm a but this album was my introduction to a guitar player named Bernie Versailles.
Yes.
And Bernie was the guitar player who played. I believe he also played on the Mad Locust Rising EP, but
Oh,
I wasn't very familiar with that. But when I got the gig, they gave me the full cassette of the as yet unreleased um, Unstoppable Force album,
hmm.
and so it was my task to go home and learn these songs. And they wanted me, and I wanted to learn Bernie's solos as note for note as I could get them. And I was blown away by Bernie. I mean, I was just like, man, this guy is so good. It's
He
just
was.
so good. How in the world am I gonna? But I wanted it. My desire was there. My raw ability to hear things and translate it from here to here
Hmm.
was there. And so it was a massive, you know, kick in the pants, as they say.
Hmm.
You know, it lit a fire under my ass, and so I got it. I did as good as I could. Did I play as good as Bernie? No, I didn't. But did I play him good enough that most people were satisfied? I would say yeah, for the most part. I'm sure there were guitar players who were like,
Yeah.
"That's not the way Bernie did that. Bernie's vibrato was better than that." I mean, of course, because that's how guitar players are. I've been that guy, at shows. But it really having to learn Bernie's solos on that album propelled me to the next level. It actually prepared me for what I ended up doing 2 years later, which was Death and the Spiritual Healing album,
That's
and
a whole other
playing
chapter.
on my first album. Yeah, a whole other
Um,
chapter. But yeah, so Bernie was fantastic, and so I hadn't been played that. It's a long way around the fence to answer your question, but yeah, about 2.5 years. But you know, it was a challenge that I was up for, and I had inspiring material to work with. Bernie Versailles solos.
That's very impressive. How did you join the band? Like, how did you even hear about this?
Well, back in the day, and again, we're talking about 1987, so long damn time ago, what, 33 years ago at this point? Um, I the big the place everyone went for everything was called Thoroughbred Music. That's where you went to buy your instruments. That's where you went to take lessons if you were going to take them. That's where you went to teach them if you were going to teach them. And that's where you went to look for gigs, because there's this hallway, and this hallway had the restrooms off of it. It had the teaching studios off of it, and it also had a big cork bulletin board, big cork board. And bands would post their musicians wanted notices there. And so I had been, like I said, I had been living in Germany. And when I came back from Germany, right at the top of 85, I immediately started going to shows, started going to Thoroughbred Music, and I started auditioning for bands, because I had been playing at that point for about a year in Germany. And so for about a year and a half prior to landing that gig, I just sat at, I worked a day job, and I would sit at home in my bedroom in my mom's house and play guitar and learn, study. And I would go every month or so out to Thoroughbred, and I would look at the musicians wanted, guitarists wanted, and anyone that looked like a heavy band, I would answer. There were bands like Oblivion, which are still around today. A band called Vengeance, which then became Vengeance Incorporated, I think. And there was others that I went and auditioned for. And I got turned down every single time. I would say I went on at least 9 or 10 auditions over the period of a year that I didn't get any of those gigs. Mm-hmm. And but the thing is that I was kind of proactive. If when I didn't get a gig, I would ask, okay, that's cool. I'm not the guy you're looking for, but if you could tell me what it is about me that you didn't like, or what it is I could improve, so that I can work on those things for the next time I do an audition for somebody. So I would ask those questions, and they would tell me. Some guy would say, well, your technique's a little sloppy in this type of stuff, and we have a lot of that type of stuff, like your triplet picking and your down picking. Maybe could be a little tighter. You tend to rush a little bit, and your vibrato's a little, not quite where it should be. Things like that. And those were really constructive. And then I got the non-constructive things like, oh, your hair's too short, and your equipment ain't good enough. But I worked on those things as well. I worked on the things to improve my playing. I worked on everything to improve my toe. I grew my hair longer, which I was already doing anyway, so it didn't really influence me. I was already doing that. But I saved up at my job, and I got better gear.
Makes sense.
And I kept improving my gear. I kept improving my playing and my whole presentation, and I got, and my hair grew. So by the time I walked into Thoroughbred that day and saw that there was a band on Combat Records that had just relocated from California to Florida and was looking for another guitar player, what they used to do is it'd be, they'd go get these printed out and duplicated at like Kinko's or something. Yeah, and they'd make these little strips at the bottom with the phone number, and then they cut it with scissors so that people could just rip off one little tab with a phone number, and then there'd be a bunch left at the bottom, and people could tear off the number and take it with. And that was extremely common there at Morristown. And I remember thinking, man, this just seems like a gig I want. Combat Records? Man, some of my favorite bands are on Combat Records, like Death and Nuclear Assault, So I was very familiar with Combat Records. I had quite a few, releases on that label. So I I wanted that gig. I didn't even know who the band was because they didn't put who the band was on the ad. They
Mhm.
kept it
Total
secret.
surprise.
But they just said, "Hey, we're a Combat Records band. We're got our new album in the can. You know, it's going to be coming out, and then we're going to be going on tour to Europe and the UK to support it. And we're looking for a guitar player." And so I took the entire ad. I didn't want anybody else, you know,
You took care of the
tearing up.
competition.
I didn't want, yeah, I just took care of the competition, just take the whole ad, you know.
Uh,
No,
how would you
no more.
describe the feeling within Agent Seal once you joined?
Well, I'll tell you, I got a good feeling off of Richard when I first called him because that's who answered the phone when I called was Richard Bateman, and he was the new bass player. He was the Florida-based bass player that had joined, and you know, he after he joined, they used his phone number and he conducted the search. And you know, he got me out there and he brought me. He had me just show up to his house and just jam with him on, you know, just whatever came up. He just wanted to determine if I was even good enough to give any music to, you know,
Mhm.
and to learn. And he decided that, yeah, okay, this guy's pretty good, and he looks the part and he plays good. So he called the other guys and told them, and so he ended up giving me an advanced cassette of Unstoppable Force, and I had to go home and learn those songs. And
Mhm.
man, like I said, it lit a fire under my ass, and so I learned them.
Um,
But the first task was just to learn a couple of them. They gave me a list of like three of the songs or something, and like an old song or two off of the prior releases. And I went home and learned that handful of songs, and I came back and met the other guys, and we jammed, and it was a good feeling. They were they seemed to be excited to have found me, and you know, to actually get a gig from an audition. It was just like, well, you know, I guess I learned my lessons well enough. You
Definitely.
know, I learned the things that I was doing wrong, and I had improved them because I was playing every single day, and you know, working on my playing, and it you know it paid off. It paid off at that moment. I got that gig. You know, after that, the feeling started rapidly going downhill.
That's right, because the booklet talks about some unusual demands that the band put on you. Can you
Oh
elaborate
yeah,
on it?
yeah, yeah. Well, there were there was a whole bunch of things, but some of the notable things were I was meant to get a tattoo. John took everybody in the band down to this um, place to a tattoo parlor. Um, and there was a bunch of other stuff going on there too, but there was a tattoo parlor there, and he said we all have to get this tattoo. We had to get either an Agent Steel logo or the Agent Steel symbol, which is like that little symbol that's on Unstoppable Force and it's on Mad Locust Rising. I'm not sure if it's on Skeptic's Apocalypse, but it's the weird little X cross thing, that
Yeah.
little symbol. So you either had to get like the Agent Steel logo or like an alien head inside of like a triangle to signify the Bermuda Triangle and that symbol, or an Agent Steel logo or whatever. We had basically, I took it as he's not giving us an option. He's not saying, you know, it would be cool if we did this. Do you want to do this? He's saying, you're doing this. If you want this gig, you're doing this. And to me, I was already a bit of a contrarian. I was already very, I had my own will, you know, I wasn't someone that was going to be subjected to someone else's dominant, you know,
Hmm.
thing, you know. And so I rebelled immediately. I was like, yeah, I'm not getting a tattoo. You're not going to brand me, you know. And he was very unhappy with that, and it just kept ramping up to almost like a fever pitch until I said, "Fine, I quit. I don't want to go tour to Europe and the UK that bad. This is not like I've never been there. I lived in Europe for 6 years, for Christ's sake. Get out of, you know, I'm out of here, you know." And I packed up my stuff and I left the rehearsal space. I was driving away. Now, because of the way my car was pointing when I loaded it up, I had to go around a bank of other buildings. And their car was facing the other way. So they were able to cut across, and they cut across and they stopped me. And I thought, oh boy, what's going to happen now? These guys gonna, I'll pull my guitar out of the case and use it like a baseball bat. I don't care. I'll start thumping people with this. I was just ready to get the hell out of there. But what they did was they stopped me and said, hey, no, it's cool, man. You don't have to get the tattoo. It's cool. Yeah. So I did not get the tattoo.
And you managed.
I meant it. I was the only guy. You know who else didn't get the tattoo? The person who dictated that everyone had to get the tattoo.
Isn't that a surprise?
Yeah. He also did not get tattooed that day. But the other three guys did. I 100% refused it, and to this day, I'm very, very happy that I refused it. I didn't have any tattoos at that time, and at that time in my life, at 19, I wasn't sure whether I ever wanted a tattoo. I have tattoos now, not too terribly many. I got this mess here, and I got a really cool, this mess here, but and I like my tattoos. They have stories behind them, and I love them. But I did not want a tattoo at that time. It was. I certainly didn't want a tattoo that was going to be dictated to me, because it felt like being like it would be like being branded.
Absolutely.
I wasn't having that.
I could not agree more. So tell me about the shows and the tour.
Well, that Hammersmith show was just like a blur. What really cemented in my mind was just, the fans that were there and that were enjoying it. Like that's what I focused on, and that's really what I remember about it. I remember some other things related to being there at the Hammersmith, like meeting the Nuclear Assault guys for the first time, and becoming friends with them, and there's a whole story around that, because the leader of the band, I'm everyone knows what I'm talking about. I'm just not saying his name on purpose, but because it's just unnecessary. He sort of tried to dictate that we were not to speak to those guys ever, the whole tour. We were to ignore them and act like they didn't exist, and to just give them no consideration. And that almost led to a fight very early on when we were just getting our hotel rooms, the day before the show, the day or two before the show. It almost led to a fight between us, because someone thought it was a good idea when they entered the cafe where we were at to do this number to them. Mm-hmm. Ignore them and do this. And it almost made those guys, take us down. But their tour manager, I believe it was, stopped them and drug them back outside. And their tour manager was Tony, a.k.a. Abaddon, original drummer of Venom.
Okay.
He was their tour manager, and he stopped them. Thank goodness for Tony, because it would have been a mess. It would have been a bad scene at the start of that whole thing.
Those were very easy-going guys from Nuclear Assault.
Very, very easygoing.
I know him.
Later on, here I am, I came downstairs for whatever reason. I think I was looking to see if there was a gift shop in the hotel to buy some little trinket or some kind of touristy garbage for my mom, hey, here, I got you something from England, and I didn't have money, so I was trying to find something cheap, but that seemed very British to get for my mom. And so I was down in the lobby doing that, and I walked outside for a little while looking around for that. And when I came back, I noticed that the doors to the lift were closing, and I had just enough time to make it if I ran. So I ran straight for the lift doors, and I just slipped in sideways and barely made it. And there I am, standing in the lift car, surrounded by the guys of Nuclear Assault. And this is post the incident at the cafe where they got the middle finger from a certain band leader, and nearly jumped us, nearly got in a fight with us because of it. And so they're just looking at me like not knowing what to think. They're just looking at me like, okay, what's this dude's deal? This is gonna be some shit. We're gonna have to thump this dude or something like that. And I looked up and I just, it took me a couple of seconds to really take in the fact that I was standing there looking at pretty much all the members of Nuclear Assault that were looking at me. And I just went, dudes, I don't know what the shit that was, man. I love you guys. And immediately they're like, oh, see, I told you not. I told you some of them would be cool. I told you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I told you they wouldn't all be dicks.
Mhm.
And so, and they were like, man, come up to our rooms, hang out with us, man. Screw those guys. I was like, yeah. And so that's what I did pretty much the whole tour. I mostly hung out with the guys in Nuclear Assault.
Um, Jay Westler was the other guitar player that you were working with. What can you tell me
Um,
about?
I can tell you that his actual name was John Reichenbach.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, John Reichenbach. Very German name. Um, so Jay Westlord was a
Stage name.
a nom de guerre that was bestowed upon him by the band leader, and he accepted it. My name was James Murphy. That's the name I'm using. I'm not changing my name for you. You know,
It,
you
it,
know
it
what the
seems like
hell?
that there was an image projected by the band leader. How would you describe that image as a whole?
Well,
The way you
he
guys
most
played,
definitely was.
looked.
He was definitely cultivating trying to cultivate a mysterious vibe,
Mhm.
trying to make it sort of intriguing, a bit of a mystery, you know, yeah, he definitely was very much for real into the alien thing. That was not just a shtick for the band. It was real for him. He 100% believed all that stuff. And I'm not making light of it. I believe that there's got to be alien life. Now whether or not they're here or have ever been here, I don't know. You know, I
Mhm.
think for sure there's aliens, but I'm not obsessed by the concept.
Got it. Um,
He was obsessed by the concept, and he legitimately was. And but rather than coming out and saying all the details of everything he liked, he just tried to put little hints in the imagery and the things he would say and hint at, just to sort of create this here. And hey, that's I don't fault him for that at all. That's he was creating an image, an atmosphere, a vibe for the band, and these are smart things to do.
it worked,
I think.
actually.
Yeah.
It worked.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
But like I said, having said that, it wasn't merely the shtick for the band. It was legit how his brain worked.
mhm. So, did you experience any personal problems within the band during this tour?
Only with the band leader.
Okay. And what
Everyone
was
else I
the
got
nature
on
of those
fine with.
problems?
Huh?
What was the nature of those problems?
Oh, just controlling behaviors. Like, for instance, at one point at the beginning of the tour, and he said, "Yeah, I'm just gonna. I need to collect everybody's passports. I need to keep them all in our, because this way, like when we go do border crossings, because back then it wasn't the European Union. It was
Sure.
individual countries, and they all had borders. Now, a lot of them were very lax, very open between certain countries, but you still had to stop. You still had to show your passport, get your stamp, blah blah blah, most of the time. And so he said he needed to collect the passports because just in case everyone was asleep when we crossed through a border, that he could just have all the passports, not have to wake people up to get them. So he made it sound like he was collecting the passports to be helpful. And he also said something that was counterintuitive. It was like, keep them safe. I'll put them all in my lockable briefcase that I could, and they'll be safe in there. Well, how safe is that really? Because if that briefcase got lost or stolen, then we've lost literally everyone's passport. Instead of like one guy being an idiot losing his passport, everyone's passport could be gone just like that.
Mhm.
So and I didn't catch on to that fast enough. I handed my passport over, but as soon as he had everyone's passport, he basically read us the riot act and said that if anyone did anything basically he didn't like and didn't toe the line and didn't, that he would kick us out of the bus right in the middle of Europe, wherever the hell, or the UK, wherever the hell we were at. without our passports, and we would be on our own.
That's
Good
not a good
luck.
perspective.
Yeah, that's not something you want to hear, you
Mhm.
know.
So
And so it was stuff like that, things like that, things like telling us we couldn't talk to this band or that band or the other, not giving us any money except there were a couple times we were handed out some money, but pretty sketchy. The whole thing was sketchy and weird, but
eventually, this led to you not wanting to continue with the band. Can you pinpoint that time?
yeah. Well, I decided on the tour, while all this stuff was happening, the passport thing, the threats to kick us off the bus, the withholding money thing, the telling us we're not allowed to, and the big thing was telling us we had to not be cool to the guys. And it wasn't even just don't talk to them or ignore them. It was actively be hostile to them when possible. You know, that's what he wanted. And I wasn't at that moment that I was told that. I already knew like I'm not long for this band because I'm not going to be told I have to be uncool to anybody, much less to a band that I loved. I was a huge Nuclear Assault fan. So you're not going to tell me that I have to, be not cool to these guys. So I decided already that I was going to quit. But, and, I don't really know how it works these days, but back in the day and all the way through my touring, all the way to when I did my last big tour, which was, I think, in 2000, some of the shows were in 2000. Um, an American band going over to Europe would quite often, if it was a bigger band, and even smaller bands did it, would do cartage.
Mhm.
Your gear would be shipped over there by a cartage company, and and so I knew we were going to be waiting for a while because it took a while. It took a while for our gear to get back from there, the cartage. I think we pay, you pay for expediting when you go over there because you got shows. You can't be over there for a long time, without your gear. So, and you can't be sitting at home for a long time without your gear. So you can expedite it. You got to, But when we came back, I guess it was just slow boat. It came back slow boat. And so I knew I was going to be waiting for my gear, and I had a lot of good gear. I had saved up and bought good gear, and so I had like a Marshall stack and two really nice, expensive Charvel strats, and my pedal boards and all that. That stuff meant a lot to me. It cost me a lot of money for a young man, doing unskilled labor, to earn it. And uh, so I just sort of played along when we got back to the States. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to be located more in southern Florida because he was in central Florida in the Tampa area.
Mhm.
That's where he was when he first got there and when he found me. But after the tour, he wanted to live in South Florida. So he used tour money. He didn't pay us any, and he used it instead to do first and last month's rent and security deposit for an apartment there in South Florida. I think probably the Fort Lauderdale area. I don't remember exactly where it was. Um, uh, and it was just an apartment, and we were all meant to live in it and find a rehearsal space and start, preparing for more tours and this, that, and the other. And so I had to play along because I wasn't going to just go straight home and say screw you guys, and while they had my gear in cartage,
Right.
because it was going to be delivered to them. So I tried to stick it out until the cartage got back, and my plan was I'm just going to hightail that out of here as soon as the cartage gets here. I'll get my gear one day; they'll be gone. Somebody will be, I'll carry my stuff out a piece at a time. You know, load it in all into I'll order like a van taxi, and I'll take that to Greyhound, and I'll go home. But before it could come to that, there was this kid who was a roadie. He went on the tour. He was over in Europe with us. He was a young guy. He was only 17. Mind you, I was only 19. But he was 17. So he was actually underage. But he was a muscular little kid. Several inches, a few inches at least shorter than me. But he was stocky. And so he could lift gear. He was strong, and so I thought John wanted him for just lifting gear, humping gear around. Um, but one day I'm sitting in that apartment. I'm literally just keeping. Oh goodness! I knocked the phone down. Sorry about that. Waiting for the Carters to come back, and he comes. This roadie kid, his name was Billy. I was watching MTV, I believe, and I think there was a Judas Priest video. It was the Ripper, and I love that. So did the band leader. He loved it too, and he was kind of just at his door. He took the only really room. He had a room to himself. He took the master bedroom, and he had that to himself, and he pretty much stayed in there. And he just sort of held court from there. He would crack the door and say things, or he'd send Billy out to tell us. So he had a buffer zone between us, and Billy was his
Messenger.
What's that little character that was always hanging out with the Jabba the Hutt, the little guy?
Oh yeah, I can't think of the name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Whoever Jabba's sidekick was, he's got a really funny name, and I can't remember it to save my life. I'm sure tons of
Funny
people
voice too.
watching
Funny
this right.
voice too.
Yeah, tons of people watching this are yelling the name right now. It's not,
All right.
but I can't think of it. But so Billy was like his little sidekick like that, and he'd come out and tell us things. And uh, we were sitting there agreeing and getting along with enjoying some Judas Priest. You know, hell, Angel Steel had covered the Ripper on the Mad Locust Rising EP, right?
Correct.
So we were all really familiar with that song, and we were all Judas Priest fans. But the next video to come up was King Diamond. You see, Abigail had just come out.
Mm-hmm.
It had just been released. And I had bought the cassette, and I loved it. And I was really into this video. I was like, oh, yeah, hell yeah, I've been waiting to see this. And the band leader, I don't know, maybe feeling some threat about King's voice or something like that. And I'm feeling it was just like he was not having it. And he was just like, yeah, this guy sucks. Halford's the king of that kind of singing. And this guy sucks. He sucks. And this band sucks. King Diamond sucks. And I was just like, well, I like it. I like it a lot. The guitar player, Andy LaRoque, is sick. He's killer. And I think King's voice is awesome. I love these songs, man. I loved Fatal Portrait, but this new one, Abigail, oh my God, it's killer. And he did not like me standing up for that. So he had a little conference with Billy in the room, and the next thing I know, Billy's coming out and he starts messing with me where I'm sitting on the couch. And he's giving me crap. And he starts poking me. And I'm like, dude, you got to stop poking me. Knock it off. And he wouldn't stop. And he keeps poking me. And I said to him, dude, if you poke me again, I'm going to punch you. This is really starting to piss me off. And he reached over and poked me again, and I punched him. And then we were fighting. And I don't know if you've ever been in any fights. If a fight lasts 15 minutes, that's a long, long fight.
That is long.
And you are done at the end of it. Done. That fight drug on for at least 15 minutes. And we were both so just, out of it. But he sicked the guy on me. He had him try to beat me up. But he wasn't really counting on that I was just mean. I had a mean streak in me, and I wasn't going to go down like that. So I gave as good as I got, and I actually took the first punch. So at the end of it, me and Billy, we're ready to be done. We're both just tired. And so we're both in the bathroom. Another thing, you fight that long and you're actually hitting each other in the face, the inside of your mouth is going to be cut to hell from your
Correct
cheeks hitting your teeth. So both of us are in the bathroom swishing with salt water, like putting salt in some lukewarm water and then gargle to try to get the cuts on our mouth heal. And so me and Billy ended up cool, He was like, he realized he wasn't just going to easily beat my ass, and I was done fired. I was done fighting. So we made a truce, and we doctored ourselves up, but I was done. I wasn't waiting for my gear anymore. I called my mother and I told her what happened, and she said, "I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to get you." I was only 19, so I was still her baby boy at that point. So she came and got me, and I didn't say anything. And once she arrived, I had my stuff already all packed up, and I just said, "I'm out of here," and I left. Now, a little while later, they got the cartage, and I just thought my gear was gone. I had continued to call. I had the phone number, so I was calling and said, "If you take my gear, I'm going to report you as stealing it." Now, it probably would have ended up having to be a civil matter. The cops probably wouldn't have done anything because possession's 9/10 of the law. I handed it over to them willingly. So, and if they don't give it back to me at the end, cops weren't really going to be able to do much other than tell me, "Hey, get a lawyer and sue them."
Yeah.
But I still made the threat anyway, and I'd have them arrested. But what ended up happening was, I don't think that so much intimidated them, but they decided that they wanted me in the band, and they had decided to relocate back to California. And they said, "Look, we're moving back to California. We're all going. We got the everything packed up, and we're ready to go. And we got the cartage. We got it all. So we got your gear. We'd love to just come by and pick you up, and let's just all go to California and do the band there. It's a better environment, better for bands." And I said, "Here's what I'll do. You show me good faith by driving here and letting me unpack my gear and put it inside the bounds of my property, put it inside my house. If you do that, you show me that trust and that faith, then I'll know that I can trust you. And then I'll be able to make up my mind, and I'll probably go with you. Because I want a career,
Yeah.
But I was lying. I didn't care. I don't care. I'll admit it. I was lying through my teeth. And they showed up. They had the gear in a trailer. I unloaded. They tried to say, "You don't really need to go through all that." We like, "Yeah, no, I need to go through it. I need to see the good faith. Too much water under the bridge at this point. I need to see the good faith." And so they're like, "Okay." And they let me unpack my gear, and I put it in my house. As soon as I had it all in my house, I said, "Later, guys. I'm not coming with you."
Yeah, that does it.
They drove off. And it's a good thing I didn't, because somewhere midway between Florida and California, somewhere in the Midwest, I think, they stopped at a hotel, and they decided it'd be a good idea to tie up that 17-year-old kid, take his shirt off. I think he was just in his underwear or something, blow up firecrackers on him, and piss on him. It made national news. Now, not like TV, but it was in newspapers. It wasn't first page. It was, buried, but it was in there.
I remember hearing about it.
I had the clipping for years, and I was just like, I read that, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I had the good sense not to go with those guys."
You
Oh my
dodged the
God.
bullet.
Yeah, I thought they were going to end up in prison. I was just like, "Man, a couple of these guys at least are going to go to prison." How they got out of that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The unnamed leader, John Cirrus, have you had any contact with him since playing?
No, someone who identified themselves to me as his son contacted me and asked me if I'd be, interested in going on tour with John as Agent Steel, and performing on a tour. And I just said, "Man, you can't be serious. No, 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 not in a million years." Now, here's the thing. I want to make sure I say this. This was my experience of the guy. Everything that I've been describing was my experience of how the guy behaved 33 years ago. We were all just kids. He very clearly had some psychological issues. That's how I took it.
Hmm.
I could be wrong. I'm not trying to diagnose him, but it seemed like deep psychological issues to me. And as far as I know, he could have come a long way and really be kind of a different person by now. I mean, it's 34 years later, 33 years later. So, or is it? How many years is it later? It's more than that.
Yeah, no, it's 3 decades plus.
Yeah, yeah, 3 decades plus, absolutely. Um, yeah, yeah, like 37 years, I think it is.
Yeah.
Good God, 37 years. Yeah. I've been saying 33. It's for sure. My math is messed up. So it's been a long time. It's been, nearly 4 decades. I would assume that the dude has hopefully changed, had treatment, grown, whatever it took to be a different and better person then. I know I have. I'm a much better person. I'm much less likely to punch someone in the face if they're making me mad. you know, I'm you know, uh, I'm a more chill guy than I was back then. Um, so maybe he is too. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm slagging off him as a person, like who he is now. I don't know him now. I know nothing about him now.
Hmm.
Um, all I have to draw upon is my experience some 37 years ago. And I did not have a particularly good time other than connecting with the crowds on the stages across Europe and the UK, and connecting with cool friends you know that I still know to this day. Like another guy that I met at that Hammersmith Odeon show was Tony Dolan, the Demolition Man.
That's right.
You know, but before he was in Venom, when he was in
Adam
Atom
Craft.
Craft.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I still chat with Tony to this day.
good guy.
So I made friends, and I you know perhaps won some fans over, and most definitely had a good time trying to win fans over.
Hmm.
And so there were good things about it. And I have to say that at the end of the day, no matter what bad experiences I had with John, since you've named him now, I might as well. No matter what bad experiences I had back then, he gave me my first shot. It was difficult. He made it very difficult. It was a rough time, but he did give that to me. And I think that I made the best of it.
Hmm.
And in order to even be able to make the best of that difficult situation, he had to have to offer that situation to me. And so I am grateful to him. I am.
And you should be. The other long-running member of Agent Seal was the drummer Chuck Profus. How would you describe him as a person and his involvement in that tour?
Oh, Chuck, he was a solid drummer and he was always friendly.
Hmm.
He was always friendly enough to me. You know, he kind of, he certainly would toe the line with John, but I don't remember ever having any big problem with Chuck.
Hmm.
He just, he was just himself. He toed the line enough to satisfy John, and he didn't particularly treat me badly or anything.
Seems like a guy who brought a lot of balance into this lineup.
Yeah, yeah, he was. I would say he was a balancing element. Absolutely, that's a good way to put it.
Richard Bateman, who was the bass player for the tour. Sadly, Richard's no longer with us. What memories do you have of him?
Just a good guy, a funny guy, great bass player. Um, it's sad the way that it ended the way it did, and that it was so hard and difficult because Richard actually took off from that apartment in South Florida before I did. He just walked off saying he was going to get some food. He left everything, his bass, everything. He had a bass there, and he
Mhm.
left it. He just disappeared with it. And I mean, without it, he just walked off like, yeah, I'm just going to go up to, you know, Publix and get a sandwich or something. The grocery store up the way, and he never came back. He called his parents, and they came and got. I think he called his dad, who just recently passed away. By the way, Richard Bateman's father just
Hmm.
passed away here recently. I knew him really pretty dang well. He was a good guy. I think he came and picked Richard up, but because of it, I still was always on friendly terms with Richard every time I saw him. But there was always this weird thing between me and him where we both know what we went through. And I think it brought back too many memories for him. He was just like, I know that James was just in the same boat as me, but it's just memories, man. We didn't particularly for a little while there didn't like to think about it. You know what I mean? Like crazy shit that went down. But I think it affected Richard worse than it did me.
If he was able to let go of his gear, then for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Finally, we spoke about lessons. So, what lessons, or lifelong lessons, did you learn from this experience?
I most definitely learned a lot on that tour. I learned a lot about what not to do from the Age of Steel camp. And I learned a lot about how you would be better off doing things from like the nuclear assault camp and from Abaddon, Tony, and those guys. So uh, I learned a little bit of the ins and outs of the business, like how you treat people. Now, having said that, I used to have quite a anger streak myself. That's why I was able to get mad enough to punch that kid, that time. It's just so I wasn't always on best behaviors.
Mhm.
I think that agency experience contributed to me being sort of a little bit too on my guard while playing with some of my later bands. The early bands that I played with after Age of Steel. I was always on my guard looking for, okay, when is this going to turn south? When is this guy going to say something crazy? When is he going to say something, tell me that I got to do something whacked, like not talk to somebody? And it did happen. It did happen. Some wacky things came up in one of my later bands where I was told stuff like, don't talk to these people, talk to this band, don't ignore them, you know? And I rebelled against it just as hard, you know, and it did cause me problems. So, I learned to watch out for, behaviors like that. And it maybe put me too much on my guard, but it served me well to know to expect this from certain people. But at the same time, too, I let myself get too angry about things for a while. So, if things started happening like that, things started happening that I didn't think were cool, I would get angry. And the real problem with it is that I wasn't always the best at communicating. Um, I'm a pretty good communicator these days. I know how to talk things out. I know how to have a mutual respect level with people and get on. But in those very early days, partly because of my upbringing and partly because of what I went through on that Age of Steel tour, I was on my guard and I was ready to be angry. And so when I was given legit reasons to be angry, I didn't have a good way of dealing with it because I didn't have those social skills.
Mhm.
I wasn't taught them at home, and so I had difficulty coping with when I wasn't happy with something. I had difficulty expressing myself, so I bottled it up, and bottled up anger, repressed anger, and a repressed sense of unfairness and things like that if you repress and bottle that stuff up, it's going to leak out. It's going to leak out in your
Absolutely.
little behaviors, attitude, the way you talk to people, an edge to your voice that you didn't really want to show people because you're just not happy, not a happy camper, and you don't know how to express it. And that happened to me a lot. And I would say certainly some of that was just in me from my upbringing. And I had to conquer that on my own. But what really set it off was some of the things that went down on that Agent Steel tour, things that I wasn't expecting that hit me, that just shocked me to my core. This is how it is? This can't be how it is. This can't be how you're an okay thing to tell somebody, you know? Luckily, I had a good sense of, you know, what was right and what was wrong, you know, and I stood up for myself. But at the same time, I sort of learned a bad behavior, which is to repress, you know, repress things.
Wow.
I got over that a long time ago, man.
I know.
I got over all
Well,
that stuff a long time
well,
ago.
James, thank you so much for reliving your memories and giving so many insights and probably a very traumatic experience. Yet,
But an important experience that I want to reiterate that I'm very grateful for, and I thank John for it, and I certainly hope he's a different person. I'm a different person, so I hope he is, and I hope he's happier in life than he was then. I know I am, you know.
Mhm.
And it was a very important experience for me. It was a very transformative experience for me. It, like I said, it lit a fire under my ass, playing wise, and it really helped propel me to the next level. Because I mean, I literally came into contact on a personal level with Chuck Schuldiner because number one, he spotted me at a death show wearing an Agent Steel shirt,
And he was
and
big on Agent Steel. I can
yes,
assure you of that.
yes, very much so. And he was like, "Oh, cool shirt, dude." You know, he saw me wearing it, and all of a sudden I recognized that the lead singer of Death is talking to me. You know, and I'd seen them live a few times, but you know, so and it's small places too because that's what they played back then when I saw them, very small little places. And so I knew perfectly well who it was saying that. And so I stopped and talked to him. And I explained to him, well, yeah, you know, I got it because I did a tour with them as a guitar player. And he was like, oh, you're that guy. You're the guy who got the guitar gig from here in Tampa. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And so we got to talk about it. He asked me all about it. I told him the whole story, you know, and he wasn't totally intrigued by it. And he's like, man, you must be pretty good if you can play that stuff. I said, well, you know, it was a challenge, but you know, I leveled up to it, you know. And he was like, wow, okay, cool. And I just, you know, so it was really Agent Steel that put me into contact with Chuck. And that exact same day is the day that I gave him my phone number. It was actually my mom's phone number because, you know, there were no cell phones then, but or at least not that, you know, regular people had. You know, rich people had the big giant things like bricks in their cars, you know, they gave them cancer. But but you know, my mom's number was fairly stable, so I gave him my mom's number.
Mhm.
And so when they needed a guitar player, he called me.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Once again, James, thank you so much for
So
speaking
yeah,
to
again,
me.
thank if John Cyrus sees this or hears it, uh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but kind of not sorry. If anything I've said has given you, you know, any indigestion or heartburn, but you know, that was my life. I lived it. That was my, you know, that's what I went through, and I'm going to be honest about it. Um, I also want to say, dude, totally grateful for the shot you gave me, and I hope everything's going good with you.
Thank you so much, James. That was amazing. Thank you.
All right, thanks, man.